intellectual. That answer is beneath you.
Let me tell you why it's not. It's precisely because when I asked you, would you vote for Donald Trump over David Duke, you said you wouldn't vote for either one. You're not talking.
Yeah, Hillary is not David Duke.
No, but it's this. If you're talking about Wall Street, if you're talking about militarism, if you're talking about dealing with folk in Honduras,
she's light years better than him about all of them.
All of those.
No, she's not. And Cornell West was making a damn good point. Bill Maher just doesn't want to deal with it. I mean, I don't say the guy's dumb as a box of rocks. I think he's a shill for the Democratic Party. So, here's information that I'm saying to you. This information is perfectly true. The logic of what I'm saying is right. And he's like, those are different. He's not David Duke. No, you're missing the point. Perspectives are relative. Meaning, my red lines are different than your red lines. You're a Democratic shill. So the things that the Democratic Party does are fucking awesome to you. It doesn't matter to you. You don't have any integrity. Ultimately, you deal with an issue based upon your political ideology. Cornell West deals with things based on integrity. So if he's saying these two quantities are both red lines, then I have nobody to vote for in this situation because both of these people hit my red lines. Now, Bill Maher sees that, puts the thing up, would you vote for Donald Trump or David Duke? He says, these two people are red lines. I can't vote for these people because they're red lines. Now, Bill Maher doesn't have the intellectual honesty to say, okay, I get your point. These things are relative perspectives to one another. Your red lines are different than my red lines. No, that's too much for him. That's too right. That's too correct. Instead, he looks at it and says, well, no, those are different. David Duke and Donald Trump is a different conversation than Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. No, they're not. They're the same conversation. You just don't like the connotation. If you're talking about one issue after the next, those candidates are just degrees from one another. They're just degrees. Now, Bill Maher is making this argument, he's better on everything. No, she's not. Even on domestic policy. If you're talking about the Trans-Pacific Partnership, she is worse. She is worse. That policy, that trade deal, that undermining of democracy that's being called the trade deal that Obama was pushing, that these other libs were pushing, including Hillary Clinton, was going to literally undermine democracy in this country. It would have made our laws more subordinate to corporate influence, meaning a multinational corporation would have been able to sue this country, take this country to a foreign tribunal to which would supersede our laws. Understand what we're talking about. Be very clear on what we're talking about. Be very clear what this asshole is supporting. He's supporting a candidate who was pushed that through. Even in the Podesta leak, she was trying to find a way to get back to it after saying she was against it. Even though before she said she was for it like 40-some times. Understand the quantity to which we're talking about. This quantity, it lacks integrity. Bill Maher lacks integrity. These guys are shills. And when they're coming in contact with somebody who's not a shill, he's shocked. He's aghast. He doesn't understand. It doesn't fit into his programming of the world. Cornell West is functioning with a level of integrity. That's the problem to Bill Maher. He doesn't understand it. I don't understand how you're functioning with this level of integrity. Don't you see that these quantities are different? Don't you see that Hillary Clinton is better than Trump? No, I don't. I don't. From my relative perspective, when I'm looking at the world and the things that I consider to be red lines, no, I don't. From a point of humanity, from a point of integrity, from a point of just what's right from a leftist perspective. No, she's not. She's not. Have this conversation with me. Have this conversation with me. You would get annihilated. You are on this show. I see you on this show every other week or whatever, every so often. And you make this ridiculous argument. And you make the same ridiculous argument over and over again. This argument is absurd. If you're going to say that Hillary Clinton is better than Donald Trump, okay, we need to be specific on that. For specific issues, it depends on the issue. But what you completely forget is, what does it matter? Yes, the deck chairs on the Titanic look better this way than the other way. But you're still hitting the rock. I don't give a shit about you moving the deck chairs around. You're still hitting the rock. I don't care if you move around buildings and everything else. The asteroid is still going to hit. You're completely oblivious to the fact that you're in a life or death situation. Hey, Hillary Clinton would have turned the car from 90 miles per hour to 60 miles per hour. That's great. You're still hitting the rock. You're still hitting the rock. You believe that somehow your chances of hitting the rock or survival are better at 60 to 90. No, they're not. They're not. You're quibbling over degrees and you're wrong. You're completely wrong. Cornell West is right on this point.
Hillary is unacceptable.
No, she is not unacceptable.
The last she was.
Why are you still arguing the last election? And we got stuff coming over here. Because they haven't learned the lesson that we need to win the next election.
No. You haven't learned the lesson that you need to learn to win the next election. You are consistently missing the point that your candidate lost. And she lost on her own merits. What is this that you're missing? What is this that you're missing? How are you in this bubble? Why are you just terrified? Why are you this much of a pussy? Deal with the situation that's presented to you. You have Donald Trump as president. You have Donald Trump as president because of the prior president. Because the person who you put up was just like the prior president. And because the prior president failed. He failed. It is not the fault of progressives, of independents, of Greens, or anybody else to put your shitty candidate in office. It is her responsibility to get those votes. And for you to make this case of, well, they haven't learned the lesson. You haven't learned the lesson. It's not Cornell West's lessons to learn. It's yours. If you're going to have a party and you're going to say we're going to try to get votes, then you need to get those votes. That is nobody else's responsibility but your own, meaning your candidate responsibility. At what point is it the responsibility of progressives to vote for your shitty candidate? At what point? Can't you make that argument about Republicans too? Hey, Republicans should have voted for so-and-so. Why don't you talk to the Republican and ask that guy? We're not Democrats. Cornell West is not a Democrat. Even if he was a Democrat, he has no responsibility whatsoever to put your shitty candidate in office. Which part of that do you misunderstand? Which part of that do you misunderstand? You're having this conversation with Cornell West. Your conversation is absurd. The point that you're making is absurd. You're looking like a fucking idiot. And you're making this pity-sought case about how you're terrified of Donald Trump, how you're scared of the big alpha male in office, and that you want progressives to get behind one shitty shield after the next, as if the shitty shield changes things. Here's the crux of it. You are sitting in an awesome position. You sling jokes for a living. You're a joke man. You sling jokes. Some of them are funny, some of them are not so much funny, but you sling jokes. And people, for whatever reason, give you money for slinging those jokes. Good for you, co-star. The pressures that are applied upon you are different than the pressures that are applied upon most people in this country. You are part of the 1%. So you can sit in this place, in this mansion. You can give Obama $1 million even though he's a fucking failure. You can do those things. These things doesn't affect you. You can smoke your pot without fear of being locked up. You don't have this issue of, I'm not going to be able to pay my rent. I'm not going to be able to buy my medication. I'm not going to be able to buy my drugs. You're not all that adversely affected by the things that the United States have brought in the sense of murdering people. You're insulated. Your illusions are secure based upon your own living stance, your own reality. So it's easy for you to get on your little show and have these ridiculous conversations because to you, this is purely about, I am terrified of Donald Trump. Donald Trump is an alpha male and I'm a little man. So fair enough. Let's bake that into the cake. What I'm getting at is the majority of the people in this particular country are not in that situation. They don't sling jokes for a living. They're digging ditches. They're doing things they don't necessarily want to do for barely making subsistence. You can understand that if you're presenting with two quantities and you don't believe that this quantity is going to do anything and this other quantity is at least talking about the economy, those people aren't crazy for picking the quantity that is at least talking about the economy. Now, if you're having a conversation with progressives look at this and say, Obama gave 95% of the wealth to the top 1%. The worst thing that Trump could do is 5%. What is Hillary going to do in that office? And if Hillary gets in that office, is she going to do things that are going to adversely affect the things that you care about? Yes. Is she going to create a situation where half of the party, meaning the Democrats, are completely oblivious and asleep to all of the things that she's going to be doing that's going to go against progressive values? Yes. The fact that Bill Maher is on here having this conversation now, shilling for Hillary Clinton, shilling for the failure that lost the prior multiple presidential elections. The fact that he's on here shilling for is because ultimately she's a horrible candidate. She lost. And the things that he's talking about are just matters of degrees that would in no way benefit the people of this particular country. I'm sorry, they wouldn't. They wouldn't. What you were going to end up with was Hillary Clinton. You're going to end up with somebody who's probably going to try to push the TPP. You were going to end up with somebody who might have even tried to privatize Social Security. That's what you're talking about. In the same way that Obama gave 95% of the wealth to the top 1%, why on earth am I going to believe that Hillary Clinton is going to do something different? Why? Even this issue of shooting blacks in the back, which is gross, disgusting, and for the most part manipulative. Even that issue. Those things happen under a black president. We're somehow to believe that Hillary Clinton is going to do more for African Americans than the black president. You're ridiculous. You're ridiculous. What you're saying has no basis in reality, or at the very least, not an evidential reality. I don't have nothing to show for that. I have nothing to show what you're talking about. You're coming up with these conceptual things that don't necessarily exist. The point that I'm making is, based on the evidence of what we have of Hillary Clinton, what she said, what she's done in prior terms that she's been involved, it's gross. And there is no reason to believe, even though she was saying all of these flowery things based upon being pushed by Sanders, that she was going to do any of that stuff. She wanted to be completely decoupled from being able to essentially do whatever she wants in that office, which is the reason why she went full on against Trump. Full on. When they did an analysis of her campaign, the majority of that stuff was against Trump. Not the economy, not what she was going to do for the middle class or anything else. It was Trump. Obama did a great job. Obama is doing pretty good. I'm going to be Obama 2.0. Trump is going to eat your puppies and your babies. That's her campaign. If that campaign wasn't enough to get her elected, why are you having this conversation with Bill Maher? Shouldn't you drag Hillary Clinton on and have that conversation with her? Huh? Is it Cornell West's responsibility to get your shitty candidate in office? Is it my responsibility? Is it Progressive's responsibility? Whose responsibility is it to get your shitty candidate in office? And you browbeating people for not supporting your shitty candidate is ridiculous. You're sad and pathetic. And your fear is showing. It's not manly in the least. You're essentially on your show scared to death about the alpha male that's in the White House. Sad and pathetic.